Welcome back to Football on the 40. I'm your host for this episode, Kevin. I'm joined by Andrew Harris, as always. And this evening we are missing Bowen. He's stuck on a plane headed to Kansas City for work. But I think I had a few hours unplanned delay there, so he's sad to miss. We'll have him back next week before the giant Texas A&M game. But we're excited to talk about our weekends, talk about the weekend in college football, how we're feeling after the win, and look ahead to maybe what some of us feel like is our last insignificant game of the season. We have a game at home against Kentucky, who's been struggling a little bit this season. That is very important to focus on. We don't want it to be a trap game, and we need this win so that we can roll into College Station with a lot of momentum. But um, again, yeah, looking forward to getting into the state of Texas football right now. It's been a great season, and um, let's get into it. Andrew, so we saw you for the game. Thanks for coming over. It was fun having you. How was the rest of your weekend? What are your thoughts on the weekend in college football as a whole?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Kev, for hosting us. It was a great time. Yeah, had a lot of fun. We got to bring up Joe Cool in just a second. I'll let you expand upon that. But but overall, it was a fun time. Even though the game was a little more stressful than we wanted it to be, but not surprising, just based on the how Arkansas views Texas, how that game typically goes. So
Yeah.
yeah, overall, I thought it was a good win for Texas. Quinn didn't play his best. Defense, I think, played maybe its best game of the year, given how good
hmm
Arkansas's offense can be. But yeah, overall, I was pretty happy. Not a ton of upsets though this weekend. I am very thankful BYU lost. That definitely guarantees that the Big 12 and the ACC will be a one-team league each. So that definitely helps Texas uh, in case they do lose another game. But hopefully, if Texas can just keep on winning, and if they do, they're going to make the college football playoff. But yeah, enough about me. Kev, what about you?
Yeah, kind of agreed. It was fun. We had people at our house the whole day. Sam and Hamilton and Hill and Eric stayed until after dinner, so we grilled some burgers after you left.
Nice.
And we just watched football pretty much the whole day. I kept asking them, like, guys, are you sure this is all you want to do? Like, you don't have to stay here and be boring with a toddler if you don't want to. But everyone was really happy, and we watched a lot of the games. I don't think the level of engagement was as high in the 2:30 or 6:30 games as the morning. We were talking about how it's kind of a bummer that our team can only consume, 3 hours of a particular Saturday. But when you're on the road and a little anxious, it's good to get those out of the way early.
Yeah.
Um, there was some nerves. I was trying to stay confident, but I mean, you were there. Laurel kept getting so nervous that she would stop watching the game, and there was a portion, I think, about midway through the second half when our chances of winning definitely went down, and we were within what felt like, in memory, one possession. Um, you could attribute that to Quinn or whatever, but like you referenced it, I was calling myself Joe Cool when everyone else was freaking out. And I turned out to be right. It could have, we could have lost that game. We've lost there before, but it was nice to at least act like I was confident the whole time.
Well, there was at one point you did say you're Joe Cool, and then about 5 plays later you said you're not Joe Cool. But then I do have to give you credit. You did go back to Joe Cool, so
Yeah.
it was like a very short thing, but it was just kind of funny in the moment how you went from one to the other. But yeah,
Yeah.
if Laurel had like a FPI like metric, like just for her, based on vibes, it would have been like 100% Arkansas in the second half. Like I'm
Yeah.
convinced she thought Arkansas was for sure going to win that game.
Yeah. It's hard to go to games with her too sometimes, not to dog on her too much, but she
She cares.
doesn't
She
like getting
cares.
her hopes up. Yeah, she
Yeah.
cares and doesn't like getting her hopes up, and she likes to set her expectations low, but like way lower than they should be. Um, anyway, so we can talk about that a whole nother day. But yeah, good
Well,
good to get by.
I'm glad she takes as much interest in Texas football than the opposite. She could not care at all. So that's
Yeah.
awesome that she does care that so much.
Yeah. Hopefully we can keep winning games and she can have some joy for the first time in a while. She hasn't let herself feel that yet, which is kind of crazy. Um, but yeah, got the win. We talked about it last week, but preseason I picked a loss for us in Fayetteville, and regardless of the score, it's good to get by. I think they said on the TV it's our second season in a row starting a season 9-1, which is pretty cool because it's been a while since we've been relevant. However, looking forward, we've got two more SEC regular season games. This next one is against Kentucky. I don't think either of us are going to the game. Is that right? I sold my, yeah,
Yeah, I sold my ticket. I think we have a kid's birthday party that we're attending this Saturday. So
that's right. Going to
yeah,
the zoo. I'll be there with you. Forgot.
yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be a good
Uh,
time. But
but you
but
know,
yeah, staying here in town.
yeah. We've been doing this segment all season, looking forward to playing some new teams in SEC play with this being our first year. We do five fast facts with our conference opponents. So some of you listeners may not know a lot about Kentucky other than their basketball team. So Andrew, give us five fast facts about Kentucky University or University of Kentucky.
Yeah. No, yeah, let's go over this quickly. Some interesting nuggets here. So, some of y'all probably know this, some of y'all probably don't. But Bear Bryant, one of his coaching stops before Alabama was at Kentucky. And it was pretty interesting. He was having some success there. He was there, I think, for like 6 or 7 years. During that time span, he did win an SEC title. So, things were kind of going on the up and up. But in 1953, he left because he felt that football would never be bigger than basketball at Kentucky, um, which is just there's not a lot of places you can say that. And Kev, I kind of want to ask you this: like, would you rather be known as like a mid-tier football school or a high-end like basketball school? Because Kentucky is one of the top 3 or 4 basketball programs in the country for college.
That's a good question. I think my response to this is my assumption that every fan's interest is the same as mine. And personally, my football fanhood is like 15x basketball. So I would say I'd rather be a, you know, what would be a comp for like a mid-tier football school? I'd rather be an Oklahoma State. I'd rather
Yeah,
be a
that's not
Kansas
bad.
State than a Kentucky for sure. Not that I look down on them because you do spend like a third of the year watching their basketball team do great things and all their um, players going on into the NBA. But yeah, I would rather be a coach of a mid-tier football team or a fan of one.
Yeah, that's a tougher decision for me because I'm more of a college basketball fan than you are, Kev. So I don't know. That's tough.
And I
But yeah, I
try.
mean, what?
I was saying like I do root for the Longhorns basketball team. I try to watch them, but it's
Yeah.
that like viewing experience where like it's halftime and you see that graphic that it's halftime on the TV and I realize like I've been on Twitter for like 2 hours straight.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Um, but yeah, I don't know. That's a tougher decision for me. I probably lean football, but I could see myself easily picking basketball in that situation. But okay, let's go to number two. So Kentucky is the only school in the SEC that has a corporate sponsor for their stadium. Their stadium is called Kroger Field. Kroger only pays 1.85 million a year for the naming rights of the stadium, which yeah, it seems like every week I keep hearing better and better deals for the naming rights of stadiums. So, um, yeah, maybe if I win the lottery one day, I can get my name on some type of stadium in Texas. Who knows? Um, but yeah, yeah. Number three, not University of Kentucky related, but I thought this was really interesting. Mother's Day. So the Mother's Day in the U.S. originally started in Kentucky. So for all the moms out there and all the celebrations we do for y'all the second Sunday of May, you can thank the state of Kentucky for that. So kudos to you moms out there. Okay, number four. Um, I did not know this, but Kentucky football was the first school in the SEC to have a night game, which was in 1929. That was, you know, just kind of looking at it, seems a little early, just in time to imagine having a night game, but that's awesome that they did at that time. And then lastly, as always, got to go over the famous alumni. We got Ashley Judge. He's a staple at all the Kentucky basketball games. Bowen's guy, Mitch McConnell. As Kevin mentioned earlier, a ton of NBA superstars. Um, Kev, I thought about doing this for trivia, but I ended up deciding not to. But it doesn't really matter now since Bowen's not on here. He's not doing um, we're not going to be doing trivia this week. But how many NBA stars from Kentucky do you think you can name off the top of your head?
I'm I'm struggling to get past Anthony Davis, to be honest with you.
That's
Uh,
okay. That's okay.
how many roughly are there in the NBA? Like eight?
Like stars or like just total?
So let's say stars.
I
Like three or
mean,
four?
yeah, I mean, you got Anthony Davis, you got Devin Booker, um, DeMarcus Cousins was there for a while, or was a star in the NBA for a while. John Wall was a star in the NBA for a while. Carl Anthony Towns, still a big name in the NBA.
That's
And
right.
then they have a ton of like really quality players for the Spurs. Keldon Johnson, he played at Kentucky as well. But yeah, they just have a ton of NBA players
I
throughout
would
their
have loved
history.
to see how many Bone could name because I think naming two players obviously would have won because I could have named one.
Bowen, I think Bowen. I decided not to do it because I felt like it was like an unfair advantage to Bowen, but I think he probably would have gotten a couple.
For sure. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Pat Riley, he played at Kentucky, and then Sonny Dykes. I did not know this. He went to grad school there, so he was a
Cool.
GA there back in the '90s. So
Yeah.
um,
I didn't get your Mitch McConnell jab until like 3, 4 seconds after, but I really wish Bone could have been here for that.
I know I really wanted to see Bowen would have had a reaction to that one.
That's
but
funny.
yeah, he'll hear it on the recording of this podcast. So
Yeah.
it'll be a nice treat for him. And then yeah, just going over their football program. There's really not a lot of notes. Kind of, I already mentioned Bear Bryant, but they've only won two SEC titles, and they are a founding member of the SEC. So back in the early 1930s, they joined. Um, so not a ton of success. They started football overall in 1881, and they're almost 500 for their history. They're 3 wins away from being 500 exactly. So, yeah, very average program. So not a ton to look back on historically, but Mark Stoops, he's definitely done, you know, um, he's done a good job for Kentucky, making them more of a relevant program than what they have been historically.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, Kev, you want to go into previewing this team?
Yeah. So games at DKR, 2:30 p.m. on Saturday in Austin. It's going to be on ABC. And I think most of the state's been getting a little bit of rain early this week. We've got a 0% chance of rain, which is good. A high of 80 and a 9 mile per hour wind. To be honest, that sounds like a fantastic November day in Austin. Um, we sold our tickets way too early. I think we would have got a lot more cash had we waited until about a week ago, but we'll be watching this one on TV. I want to break convention a little bit here because we don't have Bowen. I think we got a little bit more time than we're used to without trivia. There's been a lot of back and forth in our group text, and I'll tie this into playing with Kentucky, obviously, because the theme is like we're in the SEC. A lot of us had really low expectations for conference play because it's just known to be a very challenging conference. And nationally, there's some people kind of hating on Texas's schedule, saying that we've had it really easy this whole year. and it's getting late into the season. Like we're coming off playing Vanderbilt, uh, Florida, Arkansas, and now Kentucky. Maybe not in that order, but like it does feel like a little bit similar to a Big 12 schedule, maybe even an easy Big 12 schedule. So like what do you make of the talk that like the Longhorns have been able to skate by playing nobody and playing a terrible OU, a terrible Michigan compared to some of the other teams and what they're doing this season?
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate. I forgot who one of the Texas media members pointed this out last week, but they said, historically for the 140 years, 50 years of college football, if you said you're going to play Michigan, Oklahoma, Georgia, Arkansas, and A&M every year for the most part, that would have been like a really tough schedule, right? Um, but this year is just all those teams minus A&M are down. So I mean, that is a bummer in that regard. Texas has definitely benefited from it. Um, but I did think about this, and Kev, I appreciate you like comparing it to like a Big 12 schedule. Um,
Hmm.
because I feel like the schedule this year is there's a lot of similarities with it, like with this with our schedule last year. If you take out Alabama, like if you Georgia is like our Alabama last year, right? So our probably the like next best team that we played in the regular season was probably, or it has to be OU, right? Our loss from last year. Um, that OU team, if they had our schedule this year, or maybe let me ask you this way, like if we played that same OU team this year, what like caliber team would they be like ranking in our schedule? So like for instance, Georgia is our best team that we've played this year. Like are they the second would they be like the second best team that we would have played this year too? Would they been worse? What do you think about that?
They would be the second best team. Yeah. And I don't think they're better than Georgia is this year, but like yeah, they would be the second best team and they still might be to be honest because Michigan is struggling. I mean, I actually maybe not. I don't know if Michigan is ranked or not now, are they? Or are they
No,
totally
they're
out of
not.
it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about at this point because we aren't to the end of the season yet, right? But not to say it's been lackluster. It's been cool to play big brands like Georgia and Florida at home, especially. I would much
Hmm.
prefer those games than playing West Virginia or having like Oklahoma State come visit. But
Yeah.
I'm wondering like are these super conferences so big that when the schedule comes out, it's kind of similar to in a golf tournament where you find out if you're going to play in bad weather or if you get the luck of the draw. Like you just can't play a round robin in these giant conferences and like will it be a trend where we see strength of schedule like works against you? I don't know.
Yeah, I
What?
mean that's a really good like comparison, you know. Like Texas definitely got the luck of the draw, right? Like if it was like an open championship, like we're playing in the we're playing in the afternoon where it's or maybe in the morning where it's kind of soggy, not a lot of wind, and we're not playing in the afternoon where it's windy and things get out of control. But yeah, I mean, Texas has definitely benefited from the schedule, and it is. I mean, it is a downside of these super conferences, and I don't know how you really fix it unless you
Yeah.
strategically. I think you're going to have to change a lot to make sure there's a balance of schedules,
Yeah.
and I think that would just change the dynamic of college football a ton.
Yeah. And I mean the reason we paused to talk about that is um obviously Florida's not great. Arkansas's not great. Vanderbilt Flash, but they're kind of mid-tier. Kentucky is 1-6 in SEC play. They're second to last in the SEC behind Mississippi State, who we've also played this season. They did have a notable win against Ole Miss, which is a huge win. They were ranked in the top 10 at the time, but it's a team that is struggling and isn't a serious adversary, like potentially trap game vibes this week. On offense, Kentucky's offense is 107th in the country compared to Texas, whose offense is 18th in the country. Kentucky's only scored 23 touchdowns this season. Texas has scored over double of that with 48 touchdowns on the season. Kentucky's offense is led by quarterback Brock Vandegrift, who's kind of like a Sam Ehlinger light, will put his body on the line. He's got a great attitude, but his numbers are not great. He's passing for less than 60% completion rate. He only has 9 touchdowns and 7 interceptions on the season. And probably the biggest thing that jumped off the page when I was reviewing him is he's given up 23 sacks this season already. He has almost 200 yards of sack yards. That's negative yards. um, he's a little bit of a rusher. He's got 80 plus rushing attempts on the season. That might be a little inflated because I think all the sacks count as rushing attempts, but his legs might come into play on third down and money downs. Um, I tried to gauge like how much of a rusher he was by comparing his rushing attempts to Diego Pavia and Jalen Milroe. And he's kind of boiled down to like his legs are sort of a threat, but he's not a true dual threat. He's got 80 rushing attempts, Vandergrift does, compared to Diego Pavia's 160 and Jalen Milroe's 120, and they've got similar playing time. So something to look for maybe, but their offense as a whole is pretty bad. It's one of the worst ones we will have faced this season, to be honest. Um, and in terms of like players that score points for Kentucky that I wanted to call out, this is unusual, but their kicker is really good. Their place kicker is like the sixth best place kicker on Mel Kiper's big draft board. He's 15 for 15 in field goals and has 250 plus yarders. His name's Alex Rayner. So neither one of us expect, I would think, this game to come down to a field goal, but that might be the only way they score points, and they could do it from long range with accuracy. Um, Anything you want to add on Kentucky's offense or their struggles, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean they're not putting up a ton of points. Our defense, unless they just fall asleep, we should be able to hold them to less than 21 points. In SEC play, the most they've scored this season is 20 points on offense. So that happened once against Ole Miss and once against Florida. So
Yeah,
and if I remember correctly, I thought there was like a defensive touchdown maybe in the Ole Miss game or something like that. I could be wrong though, but yeah, they're not scoring a ton of points and. Texas, unless they have the worst game of the season on defense, they're going to played pretty well, I think.
agreed. Another way to characterize some of their offensive struggles, Kentucky's, is like after watching us play Arkansas, hearing the commentators talk positive and negatives about Quinn, one of the things they called out about Quinn was that he spreads the ball around really well. There are 7 receivers for the Longhorns that have 20 plus receptions. Kentucky only has 2 receivers with over 20 receptions. So they're pretty predictable on offense and should, keyword should, be easy to defend against. Um, on defense, it's a different story though. I don't think Kentucky has a huge advantage here, but they're not as bad on defense as they are on offense. Total defense, they rank 29th in the country. And humble brag, Texas, after falling to 2 last week, is now back at number 1 in the country in total defense.
Yeah.
Um, so they're sort of a threat in the running game. I think that's where their strength is. They've got 23 sacks, 10 interceptions, and 3 fumble recoveries. And the only player that I found to call out that's also on Mel Kiper's big draft board is Dion Walker at defensive tackle. He's 6'3", 345, and he's listed as one of the best defensive tackles in this year's NFL draft. So kind of disruptive up the middle, but that's not a huge like fit for beating the Texas offense because we have so much action going out to the sideline and to the flat to get our skill players involved. So overall, we should win this game handily. The line that we'll talk about here in a little bit is probably a good one to go after for Texas. And if we lose this game, it will be a horrific loss late in the season. So let's
Yeah.
try to avoid that. You want
Yeah,
to add anything about their defense?
I mean, yeah, I agree. We definitely should win. The only way we lose this game is if we don't show up. And this is a classic definition of a trap game. So we shouldn't take this game for granted by any means, but we should definitely win. I will say in the bigger games that they've played this year, um, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, they've held each of those schools to less than 30 points. And for Ole Miss and Georgia, less than 20 points. So they can get up for these big games. I think, yeah, there's a potential for this game to be closer than what Texas fans would want. But again, their defense is pretty good, but it's not as good as Texas. So like we should still be able to score some points on them, even though it might be a little bit harder than what we want.
Yeah. I think we got to turn the ball over a lot to have a risk of losing this game.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
Hopefully that doesn't happen. I would much rather tonight be talking about the A&M game, so I'm just like looking forward to this one being over so that we can get to
Oh
um,
yeah.
rivalry week next week. Um, so looking forward to Kentucky. Let's recap the betting over the weekend in our award-winning segment, Betting Corner. We had a pretty big turn of events. Andrew has taken the lead in Betting Corner. I don't want to get this wrong. We're all losers in Betting Corner, including Bowen. Let's maybe take a moment of silence for Bowen at minus 30 units, which is tough. That's after a winning week for Bowen. He's minus 30 units. So moment of silence for you, Bowen. You're in our thoughts and prayers, bud. But Andrew has taken the lead at minus 3.6 units. You're now leading me by over a unit. Congratulations. The theme of the season has been not to trust your gut. You've been making picks and betting the opposite, and you are now leading this podcast betting segment. Do you have any words for the guys out there that think that college football betting is a good investment?
Yeah, guys. Sometimes you got to check your gut, and as you get older, gut health is really important. And mine wasn't good. It wasn't in good shape. I needed to take drastic measures to get back to the way I needed to be. So every time my gut tried to tell me something, I would listen to the opposite, cut out those high calorie takes. Look on the takes that were going to bode well for me long term. And here I am. I have the lead. There's still a long season to go, hopefully, for Texas. So still a lot of bets. Kevin can easily come back. But happy for the moment that I'm in the lead.
Yeah. Bowen, thanks for listening this week. You cannot come back. Let's just try to make things respectable. So, this week, I'm looking at ESPN bet odds. We have a rule. We have to bet on the Texas game, which might be part of the reason all of us are negative. But Texas on ESPN bet is favored by 20.5 points. The over under is set at 47.5, and Texas is minus 1,600 on the money line. That means you would have to bet $1,600 to win $100. So, just to throw this in here too, FPI has set a 94.7% chance of winning. We know that that is the most reliable statistic in college football. So let's get into it. What do you want money wise on the Texas matchup this weekend?
Oh man, like I said before, it seems like Kentucky gets up for these bigger games. They end up not winning these games except for Ole Miss, but usually it's a little bit closer than expected. So gut wise, I think 21 is a lot given how good this defense is for Kentucky. However, got to go against the guy 2 units on the Texas cover. What about you, Kev?
My gut says the opposite, but I'm gonna bet with you. I feel confident. Like I just want to look past this one, which is probably why it will be a 3 point game and we will be really nervous during it. But the team's played really good. Like we've played really good at home all season outside of the Georgia game. I'm hopeful that we show up and like remember it's senior day. It's a lot of these guys' last opportunity to play in DKR. So regardless of the opponent, hopefully the team has a lot of juice. And I'm
Yeah,
also taking the Texas cover. I'm going to put 1 unit on that.
there you go.
Around the country in college football, or even outside of college football, what other bets do you have on your slate this weekend?
Yeah, I got a decent amount. I'll go over them quickly. So A&M plays at Auburn. I really do, even though Auburn had a better week this past week. A&M's a better team than Auburn. It is tricky to play there, so give me 2 units on Auburn. Somehow they're going to pull off the upset, so 2 units on the money line for them. For Ohio State, they play against Indiana, and so many people are talking about how Indiana doesn't have a chance. Indiana, they don't belong. They've had such an easy schedule. My initial feeling is that Indiana should be able to play against this Ohio State team. I don't think it's the best Ohio State team we've seen over the last decade. However, I feel like Ohio State, maybe they get a backdoor cover somehow. Give me 2 units on Ohio State covering, I think 13 and a half, whatever that spread is. And then lastly, it's kind of going against my gut, kind of going with my gut. It depends on your perspective on this. Um, I really think there's going to be, and hopefully this is not Texas against Kentucky, but some SEC team over the next this week or next week. I think there's going to be a huge upset. I don't know which game. I don't know who it will be, but I think it's going to be like a Kentucky over Ole Miss type of upset at the beginning of the year. Um, so I placed 1 unit on each of these games and taking the underdog in each of them. So give me 1 unit on Mississippi State money line over Missouri. 1 unit on OU money line against Alabama. I absolutely hate that pick, but that'd be crazy if they pulled it off. And then 1 unit on Florida over Ole Miss. Florida played really well this weekend against LSU. I don't think they could do it 2 weeks in a row, but again, going against my gut. But Kev, tell me your picks.
I'm intrigued by several of those because I've taken the opposite on three of those bets that you just took. So the reason why I'm calling that out is we are close to a tie. So that almost like makes it a certainty that one of us will jump and we'll get further away from each other. I hope it's me, but we'll see. Um, and I agree with your thought behind a lot of that again because you analyze and then do the opposite. I think Indiana will surprise. They're not going to win at like on the road at Ohio State, but I'm hopeful that they will cover that game and kind of do their season justice. They have played nobody yet, but I think there's a lot of people that want to see a new Big Ten team like do really well. So I'm taking 1 unit on Indiana covering plus 12 and a half. I see you said 13 and a half, but it might have moved. It is
Yeah.
13 and a half now.
Okay.
Um, I also like Alabama just smashing Oklahoma. Um, I'm hopeful at this point that like the players playing for Brent Venables are just like beaten to a pulp and like ready to get to off season and not, you know, surprisingly motivated late in the year after such a terrible season. Um, I'm taking 1 unit on Alabama cover and I can't wait to watch that one. And then um I I guess I agree and disagree with the A&M versus Auburn matchup. Auburn has played really, really bad at home this season. Like I think they only have 2 or 3 wins at home, and the line's only 2.5 in favor of Texas A&M, which is kind of surprising to me. But I'm taking 1 unit on Texas A&M to cover. So each of those three were on opposite sides of the coin. So they'll be interesting games to watch, consequential games. The one that I want to highlight, the most is I feel like my outcome in betting corner is going to be up to how well BYU's season played out because I've been betting on them since week 2 every single week. Um, they've crushed me the last two, but BYU is playing Arizona State on the road. Arizona State's 8-2, pretty good team. And Arizona State is favored by 3.5 points. So I'm putting 5 units on BYU money line in that game. Yeah,
Woo! That is a
not
big bet.
that
Wow.
is that is an unusually big bet. Um, I keep telling myself I'm going to take like the boring, easy money, and I'm never able to do it when I do that research and put my bets together. But that one will be really interesting to watch, and I'll need both of my TVs this weekend or wherever we are because it's in the same time slot as the Texas game at 2:30.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking forward to watching that one. We'll send those bets to Bowen and I'm sure he'll get them in for us. So um, lastly here, score predictions for the Kentucky game. Andrew, what are you thinking?
Somehow we're gonna have to cover. So give me 30-9. So
Okay.
yeah, I think that's technically a cover. I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll see.
I think so. I'm famously bad at mental math. I think that's 21 points, so it's not a cover, but we'll go with it.
31-9. Let's just say 31-9. There we go.
31 and 9. All right. I'm gonna bet or not bet, but predict 30 to 10. So I'm hopeful that we can get over that like 30-point ceiling that they have set in SEC play and play really well on defense. So expecting a big win. I'm gonna be crushed if we don't win this game or if it's close because they're shaping up to be like a really historic amount of hype and excitement around the A&M game. Um, and like I've said a couple times, like I'm kind of looking forward to just getting to that one. And I really hope the players aren't feeling the same way because we've got to win this one first. So
Yeah.
we'll see. Thanks for joining us this week. Bowen, we hope to have you back on schedule with your flights next time around before the huge game next weekend. But thanks again for listening. We'll see you next week on Football on the 40.
Welcome.